But we begin, of course, with the story of the commercial airliner with 155 people on board that crash landed this afternoon into the frigid waters of the Hudson River right off New York City. Miraculously, we can report that all passengers were pulled to safety. The only reported serious injury was one passenger who had 2 broken legs. U.S. Airways Flight 1549 had just taken off when a flock of birds apparently knocked out both its engines, causing the pilot to make the harrowing decision to bring the plane down into the river. You are looking now at a live picture of the downed plane at the southern tip of Manhattan, where it drifted after ditching near Midtown. The plane is being kept afloat so that investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, can examine the plane's engines. Joining us right now from the scene is NBC's Mike Taibbi, who has been covering the story since moments after Flight 1549 went down. Mr. Taibbi, Mike, good evening.
Miss Maddow, how are you? You know, this pilot, whose name is Chesley Sully Sullenberger from Danville, California, is going to be a folk hero by tomorrow, and he deserves to be, as you heard on Keith's program as well. All he did was to save his life and 154 other lives with drawing on all of his skill and 40 years experience as a pilot. Here's what happened. At 3:24 this afternoon, this flight 1549 took off from LaGuardia Airport, bound for Charlotte, North Carolina. 3 minutes into the flight, he ran into that flock of birds, apparently said it was a double strike. And he could not maneuver back to LaGuardia or just to the west at Teterboro Airport. He set his craft down on the frigid Hudson River so gently that, as one passenger put it, it was like we went over a couple of speed bumps before the flight just leveled out. The landing just leveled out. People got out of the aircraft. They were standing on the wings. We got here when they were still doing that, getting off, and everybody, as you pointed out and has been pointed out all afternoon, got away alive and safe. Amazing story.
Mike, we know that passenger ferries and tour boats and Coast Guard vessels all flocked to the rescue, raced to the scene of the crash. What do we know about the initial rescue operation? Who initially responded?
Well, that's one of the amazing pieces of good luck, Rachel, is where the plane went down. I used to live in Hell's Kitchen and walked over to the Intrepid all the time, to the river when I had my dog. We'd walk over there. The Circle Line is there. World Yacht is there, a dinner cruise thing. There are all kinds of other vessels and tenders tending all the ships to tie up in that part of the wharf. So as soon as the plane went down, passengers said there were already craft pulling up to the aircraft as the hatch, the door was open. So there was all of that unofficial first responders rescue activity before the fire department and the Coast Guard search and rescue people pulled alongside too. So there was no break at all. If it had happened another mile down the river, 2 miles down the river, it would have been a different story.
Remarkably, as we have seen before, sadly, in New York City, New Yorkers, when confronted with danger, rush toward it to see if they can help. It's just incredible. Mike, do we know anything about the passengers on board the plane? I understand there was at least one infant among the survivors.
There was one infant, and there was one fairly serious injury, a woman who broke both of her legs. But, you know, Police Commissioner Ray Kelly was down here, and he said before that about 140 of the passengers, 80 on the New York side and 60 brought over to the New Jersey side of the Hudson River, really were not injured at all. They were just being processed, didn't require any hospital care at all. This is really an amazing story, a near miraculous story, and although it's only January, you can bet this is going to be one of the extraordinary stories of the year 2009.
Absolutely. NBC's Mike Taibbi, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. I know you've been out there a long time. I owe you a hot drink. Appreciate it.
Take it. Thank you.
Billy Campbell was a passenger on today's flight. He was headed ultimately to South Carolina to visit his family for the weekend. Billy Campbell joins us right now by phone. Mr. Campbell, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. And let me say right off the bat that we're all really, really glad that you are safe tonight.
Thank you, Rachel. It's nice to be able to talk to you tonight.
I understand that you were in the second to last seat on the plane, and that soon after takeoff there was a loud sound. Could you actually see that there was engine damage at that point?
Yeah, I happened to be sitting on the window, and so I could see we heard a loud thud, and so sort of the lights went out a little bit, and the big shudder. I didn't think much of it other than we started to smell sort of a fire, and there were flames and a lot of sparks, but continuously flames coming out of the left-hand engine.
At some point, this was not a very long flight, ultimately. At some point, very quickly, it must have become clear that the pilot was going to set down on the water. Can you tell me about that revelation for you, what that was like?
Well, just a little bit of detail on it was we'd probably been in the air, you would probably know better than I, but it's maybe 5 minutes. And when this occurred, and the pilot within about 30 seconds started a very slow left-hand bank. And I think probably most of the passengers felt like he was heading back to LaGuardia. Since I was on the window and being able to look out to the left, I realized that LaGuardia was in my sight and we weren't getting any closer, and we were flying, quite frankly, parallel. didn't really know at that time, being on the left-hand side, whether there was, I assumed he had power in the right engine. But we did slow dramatically after the first thud. And when he didn't, sort of give more power to the right engine after about 30 seconds, I assumed that he probably had some problems there. And we were then beginning to descend as we headed down the river.
Did the flight attendants or the pilot or co-pilot themselves, did they make any sort of announcements? Did you have any information from the crew?
I was so far in the back, in that, as you said, next